The chopsticks in my hand didn't tremble, though perhaps they should have. I lifted another piece of galbi to my mouth, chewing slowly while my boyfriend Daniel continued his animated conversation in Korean with his mother across the table. They thought I couldn't understand a single word. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She eats like a pig, his mother said in Korean, her elegant fingers gesturing dismissively toward me. No wonder she's getting fat. You should find someone better, Daniel. Someone who understands our culture. Daniel laughed, the sound I used to find charming now scraping across my nerves like broken glass. Mom, relax. She's convenient for now. The American girlfriend looks good for the promotion, diversity, and all that corporate nonsense. Besides, she makes good money. Her salary helps cover my student loans. I smiled warmly at them both, playing the oblivious white girl who thought they were discussing the weather. My phone sat innocently beside my plate, voice recorder running beneath the camera app I'd pretended to use for food photos. This was the 7th dinner I'd recorded. The 7th time I'd sat through their casual cruelty, building my case piece by piece. More kimchi, Mrs. Park? I asked brightly, my American accent deliberately thick and clumsy. She smiled tightly, the expression never reaching her eyes. So polite, she said in English, each word dripping with condescension. Then back to Korean. But so stupid. Does she even know what kimchi is made from? Probably thinks it's just spicy cabbage. If only they knew. I'd spent 3 years in Seoul during college, studying international business at Yonsei University. I'd lived in Hongdae, dated a Korean guy for 18 months, and could discuss everything from the intricacies of Hangul to the proper way to make kimchi jjigae from scratch. My Korean was fluent enough that I'd once been mistaken for a gyopo, a Korean American, by a taxi driver in Gangnam. But when I'd met Daniel Park 18 months ago at a tech conference in Austin, I'd made a calculated decision. His LinkedIn profile had shown him working at NextCore Solutions, the same company I'd been trying to get hired at for months. When he'd approached me at the networking mixer, I'd seen an opportunity. I'd deliberately downplayed my Korean language skills, mentioning only that I knew a few words from watching K-dramas. The irony was that I'd landed the job at NextCore 3 months later on my own merits, my expertise in cybersecurity impressive enough that they'd created a new position for me. Daniel never knew that I'd eventually stopped needing his insider perspective on the company. By then, we'd been dating for half a year, and I'd actually believed he loved me. How naive I'd been. "Is the food good?" Daniel asked me in English, his smile so practiced it could have been painted on. "Not too spicy?" "It's perfect," I said, beaming at him. "Your mom is such an amazing cook." Mrs. Park nodded graciously, then turned back to her son. In Korean, "At least she's compliant. Train her well now, and she'll be useful later." My friend's son married an American woman who didn't know her place. Divorced within 2 years. You need someone who will defer to you, especially if you want to move up at that company. "Don't worry, Mom," Daniel replied in Korean, reaching over to pat my hand in a gesture that would have seemed affectionate to any English speaker watching. "She's completely manageable. Thinks I'm brilliant. I've already positioned myself as her mentor at work. Everyone sees me as the expert teaching the new girl. When the senior security architect position opens up next quarter, HR will definitely consider my leadership qualities." My smile didn't waver. Internally, I was cataloging every word, adding it to the mental transcript I'd been building for weeks. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. Because here's what Daniel didn't know. That senior security architect position? I'd already been interviewed for it. Twice. The hiring manager, Jennifer Chen, had told me confidentially that I was the top candidate, The role came with a 40% salary increase, a team of 6 people to lead, and direct access to the C-suite. Daniel hadn't even been asked to apply. I should get the recipe for this, I said, gesturing to the japchae. Maybe I could make it for Daniel sometime. Mrs. Park's expression could have curdled milk. In Korean, as if she could ever cook like a proper Korean woman. These American girls think cooking means heating up frozen food in a microwave. Daniel snorted into his soju. She tried making me ramen once. Instant ramen. She still managed to mess it up. I had to order us takeout. That particular memory stung because it was actually true, though Daniel had conveniently forgotten the context. I'd been recovering from a stomach virus, had barely been able to stand, and had still dragged myself to the kitchen to try to make him something when he'd complained about being hungry. I'd apologized profusely while he'd rolled his eyes and grabbed his phone for delivery. "You're so good to me," I said now, squeezing his hand. The recording app on my phone continued its silent work. Mrs. Park's living room was a shrine to Korean traditionalism mixed with obvious status symbols. A massive Samsung TV dominated one wall, while expensive-looking celadon vases flanked the entertainment center. Family photos covered every available surface. Daniel graduating from UT Austin, Daniel at his first job, Daniel receiving some corporate award. There were no photos of his father, who'd apparently returned to Seoul years ago for business and never come back. Mrs. Park had rebuilt her life here in Houston, working her way up to a senior position at a Korean import company, and she'd poured all her ambitions into her only son. I understood the pressure Daniel must have felt growing up. I could even sympathize with the weight of immigrant parental expectations. What I couldn't forgive was using me as a stepping stone while mocking me in a language he thought I couldn't understand. "Coffee?" Mrs. Park offered in English, already standing to clear the table. "I'd love some," I said, rising to help. "Let me—" "No, no." She waved me off. "You are guest. Sit." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I sat obediently while she and Daniel continued talking in the kitchen. Their voices carried clearly into the dining room, and my phone, now casually placed on the side table as if I'd just forgotten it there, continued recording. "The promotion will come through soon," Daniel was saying in Korean. "Once I get that senior architect position, I'll have enough salary and status to consider better options. There are several Korean-American women at church Mom's been hinting about. Professional, educated, from good families. That girl out there," Mrs. Park's voice was sharp with distaste, "is she expecting marriage?" "She's mentioned it a few times. Hints about her friends getting engaged. Looks at rings when we pass jewelry stores." I just changed the subject. "Why commit when I can wait for something better?" Something better. The words settled into my chest like ice water. "Smart boy," Mrs. Park approved. "Americans divorce so easily anyway. Better to choose carefully the first time. But be careful. If you break up with her before you get promoted, it might look bad at work. Wait until after." I know. I've thought about it. She's useful for now. Once I'm secure in the new position, I'll find a reason. Maybe I'll say we want different things, or that I need to focus on my career. She'll believe anything I tell her. The coffee maker gurgled in the background. I stared at a photograph on the shelf. Daniel, at maybe 8 years old, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, his arm around his mother's waist. Had he always been like this, or had something broken along the way? When had he learned that people were tools to be used and discarded? They returned with coffee, and I accepted mine with a grateful smile. The conversation shifted to safer topics. In English now, about my work, their work, the weather, some movie Daniel wanted to see. I played my part perfectly. The agreeable girlfriend, the outsider grateful to be included, the naive American girl who thought she was building a future with this man. When we finally left around 9 p.m., Daniel drove us back to my apartment. The apartment he'd been living in rent-free for the past 6 months, claiming he needed to save money to invest in our future. My apartment, with my furniture, my kitchen supplies, my Netflix account, my everything. The apartment where he lived like a king, while contributing nothing except his presence and his lies. "Mom really likes you," he said as we pulled into my parking space. The lie was so casual, so practiced. "She's wonderful," I replied warmly. "I'm so lucky you're part of my life, Daniel." He smiled and squeezed my knee, and I felt nothing. Whatever love I'd felt for him had evaporated over the past few weeks as I'd sat through dinner after dinner, recording conversation after conversation, building my case with the methodical precision that had made me good at my job. Because here's what Daniel didn't know. 3 weeks ago, I'd been called into a meeting with HR. Not for anything I'd done wrong, quite the opposite. They'd asked me if I'd experienced any issues with workplace dynamics, if anyone had made me feel undermined or overshadowed. At first, I'd been confused. Then Jennifer Chen, who'd sat in on the meeting, had gently explained. Several people had noticed that whenever I presented in meetings, Daniel had a habit of clarifying my points, often restating exactly what I'd just said as if I'd been unclear. When I'd solved a critical security vulnerability last month, Daniel had somehow been copied on the company-wide praise email and had replied, all thanking people for letting him mentor such a promising team member. When I'd been asked to present at an industry conference, Daniel had suggested to our boss that he should co-present to make sure the technical details were accurate. Jennifer had been frank. "We're seeing a pattern that concerns us. We want to make sure you have the support you need to succeed here. And we want to be certain that any candidates for leadership positions actually possess the collaborative qualities we value." I'd been careful in that meeting. I hadn't wanted to seem like I was complaining or stirring up drama. I'd simply said I'd handle it and ask them to let me know if any formal issues arose, but the seed had been planted. HR was watching Daniel now, and he had no idea. Over the next 3 weeks, I'd begun my own investigation. I'd started recording our private conversations, legal in Texas, a one-party consent state. I'd documented every time Daniel took credit for my work, every time he mentored me in a meeting by explaining concepts I'd already mastered, every time he positioned himself as the expert and me as the student. I'd created a detailed timeline with supporting evidence, emails, chat logs, witness statements from colleagues who'd started approaching me privately to express concern. And then I'd started recording the dinners with his mother. Because I'd realized something. Daniel's behavior at work was just a reflection of how he saw me in every aspect of our relationship. I wasn't his partner. I wasn't even really his girlfriend. I was a convenient prop, a useful tool, a temporary placeholder until he could trade up to someone he considered more suitable. Now, as we walked into my apartment and Daniel immediately sprawled on my couch to play video games on my TV, I felt only a cold clarity. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about making sure he understood that actions had consequences. "I'm going to work on some stuff in the bedroom," I said. "Big presentation tomorrow." "Mm-hmm," Daniel mumbled, already absorbed in his game. I closed the bedroom door and pulled out my laptop. The recordings were all backed up in 3 separate cloud services, each protected by encryption and passwords Daniel would never guess. I'd been meticulous. Dates, times, locations, participants. Each recording was transcribed with timestamps and Korean to English translations. The whole package was professional, detailed, and damning. Tomorrow was Friday. My final interview for the senior security architect position was scheduled for 10 a.m. I already knew I had the job. Jennifer had essentially told me as much. But there was a formality to these things. The official offer would come Monday, which meant I had all weekend to make my final preparations. I opened my email and began composing a message to Jennifer Chen and Carla Rodriguez, NextCore's VP of Human Resources. The subject line was simple: formal complaint, pattern of discriminatory behavior and workplace misconduct. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I outlined everything. The way Daniel had systematically undermined me at work, taking credit for my achievements while positioning himself as my superior, despite us being the same level. The way he'd used our relationship to gain insider information about my projects, which he'd then leveraged in meetings to make himself look more knowledgeable. The way he'd deliberately mistranslated things his mother said to me in Korean, claiming she'd said kind things when she'd actually been insulting me, and then I attached the recordings. 7 dinners, each one time-stamped and transcribed. In those conversations, Daniel had discussed using me to appear more diverse and culturally sensitive to management, planning to leave me immediately after securing his promotion. Sharing confidential company information about the senior architect position with his mother, including details about my interviews that should have been private, mocking my work performance in Korean to his mother, despite publicly praising me at the office. Discussing strategies to undermine my professional credibility while maintaining the appearance of being my mentor. The email took me 2 hours to write, crafting each sentence with care. This wasn't an emotional rant. This was a legal document, backed by evidence, presenting a clear pattern of behavior that violated multiple company policies: discrimination, harassment, breach of confidentiality, and creating a hostile work environment. I saved it as a draft. Monday morning, after my job offer was official, I would send it. I wanted there to be no question that I'd earned my promotion on my own merits, that this wasn't about professional jealousy or competition. This was about holding someone accountable for their actions. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Rachel. "Still on for lunch tomorrow?" "Definitely," I typed back. "Have so much to tell you." Rachel was one of the few people who knew about my Korean language skills. She'd been my roommate during our semester in Seoul, and she'd watched me fall in love with the language, the culture, the food, everything. She'd also been the one I'd called crying 3 weeks ago when I'd first understood what Daniel and his mother were saying about me at dinner. "You need to document everything," she'd said firmly. "Don't get mad. Get evidence." So I had. And now I had evidence that would end Daniel's career at NextCore. Not because I was vindictive, but because he'd violated clear company policies. The recordings would show not just his personal betrayal, but his professional misconduct, using our relationship to gain insider information about company decisions, discussing confidential HR matters with outside parties, creating a hostile work environment through deliberate undermining and discrimination. From the living room, I heard Daniel laugh at something in his game. The sound that used to make me smile now just reminded me of how he'd laughed when his mother called me fat. How he'd laughed when discussing his plans to dump me. How he'd laughed while building his career on my back, fully intending to kick me aside as soon as I'd served my purpose. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. "Order us some food? I'm hungry." Not, "Could you?" Not, "Would you mind?" Just a command. As if I were his personal assistant rather than his girlfriend. As if my purpose was to serve him. I looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Sure. What do you want?" Surprise me. I ordered his favorite Korean fried chicken, the expensive kind from the place he loved. It would be the last meal I'd ever buy him. Monday, his world would change. He just didn't know it yet. While I waited for the delivery, I pulled up the recordings again, listening to them one more time. Not because I needed to. I practically had them memorized, but because I needed to remember why I was doing this. It would be easy to second-guess myself, to wonder if I was overreacting, to feel guilty about what I was about to unleash. But then I heard his voice, laughing as he told his mother about his plans to trade me in for someone better. I heard him discussing my weight, my cooking, my intelligence, my worth as a human being. I heard him strategizing about how to use me for maximum professional benefit while giving me nothing in return, and I felt no guilt at all. The doorbell rang. I paid the delivery driver, tipped generously, and brought the food to the living room. Daniel paused his game long enough to dig in, making appreciative noises. "You're the best," he said, mouth full of chicken. "I know," I replied softly. He didn't hear the steel underneath those words. He never heard anything except what he wanted to hear. That was going to be his downfall. I took my own food back to the bedroom and closed the door. While I ate, I went through my checklist one more time. Recordings, secured and backed up. Transcriptions, complete and accurate evidence of workplace misconduct, documented with dates and witnesses. Timeline of events, detailed and chronological supporting documentation, emails, chat logs, meeting notes. Legal review. I'd consulted with an employment attorney, without mentioning names, to ensure everything I'd done was legal and admissible. Everything was ready. All I had to do now was wait for Monday. My phone buzzed with another message from Rachel. "Proud of you. He has no idea what's coming." She was right. Daniel thought he was so clever, managing two versions of himself: the supportive boyfriend in English, the calculating user in Korean. He thought he'd found the perfect system: an American girlfriend who made him look good at work, who paid his bills, who had no idea what he really thought of her. What he'd actually found was someone who spoke his language in more ways than one. Someone who understood not just his words, but his culture, his context, his meaning. Someone who'd played a role just as carefully as he had, gathering evidence while he thought she was gathering cookbooks. I finished my chicken and opened my laptop again. There was one more thing I needed to prepare: my acceptance speech for the senior security architect position. Because I would get that job. I deserved it. And no one, not Daniel, not his ambitions, not his schemes, was going to take it from me. The speech needed to be gracious, professional, focused on teamwork and company values. It needed to show leadership qualities, vision, humility. It needed to be the kind of speech that would make everyone in that room absolutely certain they'd made the right choice. And then, later that same day, when HR got my email about Daniel's conduct, everyone would understand that I hadn't been making excuses or playing politics. I'd simply been doing my job excellently while dealing with someone who'd tried to sabotage me. The contrast would be stark. Me, rising above. Him, exposed below. I smiled as I typed. Outside my bedroom door, Daniel was probably thinking about his own future promotion, the one he thought was assured. He was probably planning what he'd say when he dumped me, how he'd let me down gently while making it clear he was moving on to bigger and better things. He had no idea that his future was about to become very, very different from what he'd imagined. The weekend stretched ahead, and I had plans. Rachel and I would have lunch tomorrow, and I'd tell her everything. Sunday, I'd prepare my outfit for Monday's interview. Something professional but powerful. The kind of outfit that said, "leader," without being flashy. I'd review my presentation materials one more time, practice my talking points, make sure every detail was perfect. And Monday morning, I'd walk into that interview room and show them exactly why I deserved that promotion. Then I'd accept the position with grace and gratitude. And then, with my new role secure and official, I'd send that email to HR. Daniel would be called into a meeting. He'd be confused at first, then defensive, then probably angry. He'd claim I'd misunderstood, that I was being oversensitive, that this was all just a cultural misunderstanding, and then they'd play the recordings, they'd show him the transcripts, they'd present the evidence of his workplace misconduct, and he'd realize, too late, that the naive American girlfriend he'd been using had understood every word, every insult, every plan, every betrayal. The expression on his face would be something I'd carry with me forever. From the living room, I heard him call out, "Babe, come watch this with me. This game is hilarious." "In a minute," I called back, my voice bright and cheerful. Just a few more days of pretending. Just a few more days of being the oblivious girlfriend who didn't speak Korean, who didn't know she was being used, who didn't know her boyfriend was counting down the days until he could trade her in. And then the truth would come out, devastating and complete. I saved my work and stood up, stretching. Time to go sit on the couch with Daniel, laugh at his game, maybe let him put his arm around me while he mentally calculated how much longer he needed to keep up the charade. Little did he know, I was doing exactly the same math. The difference was, my calculations were going to work out. His were about to explode in his face. I opened the bedroom door and walked back into the living room, wearing my mask of perfect Clueless contentment. Just a few more days. I could do this for a few more days. After all, I'd been doing it for weeks already. What was one more weekend? The game flickered on the TV screen. Daniel laughed at something, and I settled beside him with a smile. Inside, I was counting down the hours until Monday morning, when everything would change. He reached over and took my hand, probably thinking about how convenient I was, how useful, how perfectly manageable. I squeezed back, thinking about justice. Just a few more days. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything feel inevitable. I woke up at 6 a.m., an hour before my alarm, my mind already racing through the day ahead. Beside me, Daniel was still sleeping, his face peaceful in a way that almost made me feel something like pity. Almost. I showered and dressed with deliberate care. A navy blazer, crisp white blouse, tailored pants. Professional, confident, unshakable. The kind of outfit that said I belonged in a leadership role. My hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, my makeup subtle but polished. When I looked in the mirror, I saw exactly what I wanted to see. A woman who had earned her place and wouldn't be undermined by anyone. Daniel stirred as I was making coffee. "Big day?" he mumbled, stumbling into the kitchen. "Final interview for the senior architect position," I said, handing him a cup. 10 a.m. He took the coffee, suddenly more alert. "Oh, right, that." His expression flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Concern? Calculation? "Well, good luck. I'm sure you'll do your best." The condescension in those words would have hurt a week ago. Now they just confirmed everything I already knew. He didn't think I'd get the job. He probably thought they were interviewing me as a formality, that the position was meant for someone like him, someone who'd been positioning himself as the mentor, the expert, the natural leader. "Thanks," I said warmly. "I really appreciate all your support." He smiled, pleased with himself. "That's what I'm here for." I drove to NextCore's headquarters in downtown Houston with my windows down, letting the morning air clear my head. The recording of last night's conversation was already transcribed and added to my file. Daniel had spent an hour on the phone with his mother, speaking in Korean while I'd pretended to be absorbed in a book. They'd discussed his own career prospects, and he'd mentioned casually that he might apply for the senior architect position himself, just to see what happens. "If that American girl somehow gets it," his mother had said, "you'll need to be strategic. Make sure people see you as the real expert. She'll need guidance, and you can position yourself as indispensable." "Don't worry, Mom," Daniel had replied. Either way, I win. If I get the job, perfect. If she gets it, I'll be the power behind the throne. And then, once I've milked that for everything it's worth, I'll move on. Maybe to a different company where I won't be tied to her anymore. Every word was now part of my evidence file. Every casual cruelty, every calculated manipulation, every plan to use me as a stepping stone. I arrived at NextCore's sleek glass building 45 minutes early. The lobby was quiet, just a few other early arrivals getting coffee from the cafe. I ordered a green tea and sat in one of the modern leather chairs, reviewing my presentation notes one last time. Ready to knock their socks off? I looked up to see Jennifer Chen, my soon-to-be boss, smiling down at me. She was in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and an air of no-nonsense competence that I'd always admired. Absolutely, I said, standing to shake her hand. Good. Though between you and me, this is really just a formality. The team is unanimous. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. I also wanted you to know, HR has some questions they'd like to ask you after the interview. Nothing bad, she added quickly, seeing my expression. Just some follow-up on workplace dynamics. Completely voluntary, but I think it would be valuable. My heart rate picked up slightly. Of course. Happy to help. Great. See you at 10. The interview was, as Jennifer had suggested, more of a conversation than an interrogation. The panel consisted of Jennifer, two other senior managers, and Marcus Webb, our CTO. They asked about my vision for the security architecture team, my thoughts on emerging threats, my leadership philosophy. I spoke confidently about collaborative approaches, mentorship, building a culture of continuous learning. When Marcus asked how I'd handle a situation where a team member consistently took credit for others' work, I chose my words carefully. I think the first step is documentation and clear communication. Everyone's contributions should be visible and acknowledged. If someone is positioning themselves as a sole expert or undermining teammates, that's not just bad for morale, it's a security risk. Our work requires trust and transparency. Jennifer's slight nod told me she understood the subtext. The interview concluded at 11:15. As I was gathering my materials, Jennifer touched my arm lightly. Carla Rodriguez is waiting in conference room C. She'd like to speak with you now, if you have time. Of course. Carla Rodriguez was NextCore's VP of Human Resources, a woman with silver hair and a reputation for being both fair and formidable. When I entered the conference room, she was seated at the table with a laptop open and a thick folder beside her. Please, sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. First, let me say congratulations. The senior security architect position is yours, pending the standard background check and paperwork. We'll have the official offer to you by end of day. Relief and triumph flooded through me. Thank you. I'm honored. You should be proud. You earned it. Carla's expression became more serious. Now, I'd like to discuss something sensitive. Over the past few weeks, we've received some informal concerns about workplace dynamics, specifically regarding your interactions with Daniel Park. I want to be clear. This conversation is confidential, and anything you share will be taken seriously. I took a breath. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for. Actually, I said, I've been planning to file a formal complaint. I wanted to wait until after the interview process was complete, so there would be no question about my motivations. I have extensive documentation. Carla's eyebrows rose slightly. I see. Please go on. I pulled out my tablet and opened the file I'd prepared. I'll start with the context. Daniel and I have been in a relationship for 18 months. What he doesn't know is that I'm fluent in Korean. I studied in Seoul for 3 years during college. Since we've been together, I've been recording conversations where he and his mother discuss me in Korean, believing I can't understand them. Carla's expression remained neutral, but I saw the sharpening of her attention. These recordings document several concerning patterns, I continued. First, Daniel has explicitly discussed using our relationship to appear more diverse and culturally sensitive to management, viewing me as a career asset rather than a partner. Second, he's discussed confidential company information with his mother, including details about my interview process for this position. Third, he's systematically undermined my professional credibility while positioning himself as my mentor, despite us being at the same level. And fourth, he's planned to terminate our relationship immediately after securing a promotion, having used me for professional and financial benefit. I turned the tablet to show her the organized file structure. I have 7 recorded dinners, each transcribed and translated. I also have documentation of workplace incidents where he's taken credit for my work, corrected me in meetings by restating what I'd just said, and suggested to management that he should oversee my projects. Carla was silent for a long moment, her eyes scanning the screen. These recordings, they were made in Texas? Yes. One-party consent state. I've consulted with an attorney to ensure everything is legal and admissible. And you have translations? Professional translations, yes. I did them myself, but I'm prepared to have them verified by an independent translator if needed. Carla opened her laptop and began taking notes. I'll need copies of everything. This is extensive and extremely concerning. She looked up at me. I need to ask, why wait until now? Some of these recordings are from weeks ago. 2 reasons, I said. First, I wanted to be absolutely certain of the pattern. 1 or 2 comments could be explained away as jokes or misunderstandings. But 7 different occasions, with consistent themes and increasingly explicit planning, that's a pattern. Second, I didn't want anyone to think this was about competition for the senior architect role. I wanted that position based on my merits, not because I'd filed a complaint about a colleague. Carla nodded slowly. That's remarkably professional of you. Many people in your situation would have acted much sooner. I wanted to do this right, I said simply. Not just for me, but for anyone else who might face similar behavior in the future. We spent the next hour going through every piece of documentation. Carla asked detailed questions, took extensive notes, and had me send everything to a secure HR drive. When we finally finished, she sat back in her chair with a heavy sigh. This is one of the most thoroughly documented complaints I've seen in 20 years of HR work, she said, and it's also one of the most disturbing. Mr. Park has violated multiple company policies: confidentiality, creating a hostile work environment, discrimination, and professional misconduct. The fact that he did it in a language he thought you couldn't understand doesn't make it less serious. If anything, it makes it more calculated. What happens now? I asked. We'll be launching an immediate investigation. Mr. Park will be placed on administrative leave as of today while we review the evidence and conduct interviews. Given the strength of your documentation, I anticipate this will be resolved quickly. I'll be frank with you. This kind of behavior typically results in termination. Something in my chest loosened. Not satisfaction exactly, just relief. That someone in authority was taking this seriously, that I hadn't been overreacting, that justice was possible. What about the other issues? Carla continued. The personal relationship? The living situation? He's been living in my apartment rent-free for 6 months, I said. I'll be asking him to leave today. The relationship is over, obviously. I just needed this investigation to be official before I could safely end things. Carla's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry you had to go through this, both professionally and personally. You shouldn't have had to build a legal case just to be treated with basic respect. No, I agreed. But I'm glad I did it right. I left the conference room at 12:30. My phone had 3 texts from Daniel. How'd the interview go? Want me to pick up lunch? And, my mom wants to know if we're coming to dinner on Saturday. I didn't respond. Instead, I texted Rachel. It's done. Told HR everything. He's getting suspended today. Her response was immediate. OMG. Are you okay? Want me to come over tonight? Yes. I'm kicking him out after work. Could use moral support. I'll be there at 5, bringing wine and pizza. You're the best. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a strange state of limbo. I worked on routine tasks, attended a meeting about a minor security patch, responded to emails. Every few minutes, I'd remember what had happened that morning and feel a surge of something between anxiety and triumph. At 3:15, I saw Daniel being escorted into a conference room by Carla and another HR representative. His expression was confused, maybe a little annoyed, like he thought this was just some routine meeting. He had no idea what was coming. I didn't see him come out. At 4:30, Jennifer stopped by my desk. Go home, she said quietly. You've had a hell of a day. We'll handle everything from here. Is he? He's been suspended pending investigation. Security is escorting him out of the building now. He won't be returning to your apartment tonight. HR has made that very clear. If he shows up anyway, you're to call the police immediately. We've also connected you with our employee assistance program if you need counseling or legal support. I nodded, feeling suddenly exhausted. Thank you for taking this seriously. Thank you for documenting it so thoroughly. You may have saved us from a much bigger problem down the road. She paused. The official announcement of your promotion will go out Wednesday, once the paperwork is finalized. But between you and me, you're going to be an excellent senior architect. You've already shown more integrity and professionalism than most people I've worked with. I packed up my things and headed to the parking garage. My hands were shaking slightly as I unlocked my car. It was really happening. After weeks of careful planning, meticulous documentation, strategic patience, it was actually happening. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, this time from Daniel's number. I declined it. A text appeared. What the hell is going on? HR is saying I can't go back to your apartment? What did you tell them? I blocked his number and drove home. Rachel arrived at 5 on the dot, as promised, carrying 2 pizzas and a bottle of wine. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. You did it, she said. You actually did it. I did it, I repeated. And suddenly I was crying. Not sad tears, but something more complicated. Relief, anger, grief for what I'd thought the relationship was. Triumph that I'd stood up for myself. All of it pouring out at once. We sat on my couch, the couch Daniel had sprawled on just yesterday, and I told her everything. The interview, the meeting with HR, the moment when Carla had confirmed that my documentation was airtight and Daniel would face consequences. He's probably losing his mind right now, Rachel said, pouring us both generous glasses of wine. Trying to figure out what happened, when he realizes you understood every word he ever said in Korean. She shook her head. I almost wish I could see his face. Part of me does too, I admitted. But mostly I just want him gone from my life. I want to change my locks, wash my sheets, and pretend he never existed. We can do all that, Rachel said. Tomorrow, we'll change the locks. Tonight, we eat pizza and celebrate the fact that you're a badass who just landed a huge promotion and took down a manipulative asshole in one day. We clinked glasses. Around 7 p.m., there was a pounding on my door. Daniel's voice came through, angry and desperate. I know you're in there. What the hell did you tell HR? You can't just lock me out of my own apartment. Not your apartment, Rachel called out. And if you don't leave, we're calling the police. I need my stuff. We'll pack it up and you can arrange to pick it up with a police escort, I yelled back. Now leave before I file a restraining order. The pounding continued for another minute, then stopped. I heard his footsteps retreating down the hallway. My hands were shaking again, but Rachel squeezed my shoulder. He's gone, and he's not coming back. We spent the next 2 hours packing up Daniel's belongings, his clothes, his gaming console, his toiletries, his collection of Korean instant ramen that he'd never once offered to share. Everything went into boxes that we stacked by the door. Tomorrow, I'd arrange for him to pick them up with a police officer present. While we worked, Rachel asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you think you'll ever tell him that you understood everything? I considered it. Part of me wanted him to know. Wanted to see the moment of realization, the horror of understanding that every cruel word, every calculated manipulation, every mocking laugh had been heard and understood. I wanted him to know that he hadn't been clever. He'd been caught. But another part of me knew that the not knowing might be worse. He'd spend months, maybe years, trying to figure out what had happened. How HR had found out about his behavior. What evidence they had. Whether someone had betrayed him, or if he'd slipped up somehow. He'd never know that his girlfriend had understood every word. That she'd been fluent in Korean the entire time. That while he'd been laughing at her supposed ignorance, she'd been building an airtight case against him. No, I said finally. Let him wonder. That's better than any confrontation I could have. Rachel grinned. Cold. I love it. By 10 p.m., Daniel's entire presence in my apartment was reduced to 6 boxes stacked by the door. Rachel had helped me strip the bed and put on fresh sheets, light a candle to clear the air, rearrange the furniture slightly so the space felt different. New, mine again. We sat back down on the couch with our second bottle of wine, and Rachel raised her glass. To new beginnings, to promotions earned through actual merit, and to the sweetest revenge I've ever witnessed. To justice, I corrected. It's not revenge if it's just documenting the truth and letting appropriate authorities handle it. Fine. To justice that tastes suspiciously like revenge. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd felt in weeks. I'll drink to that. Wednesday morning, the official announcement went out. I was the new senior security architect, effective immediately. My inbox flooded with congratulations from colleagues, many of whom seemed genuinely happy for me. Jennifer sent a separate email welcoming me to the leadership team and scheduling our first strategy meeting for Friday. There was no announcement about Daniel. HR didn't publicize disciplinary actions. But word spread anyway, the way it always does in offices. People knew he'd been suspended. They knew there was an investigation. And because several people had witnessed his habit of undermining me in meetings, it wasn't hard for them to connect the dots. On Thursday, Carla called me into her office. The investigation is complete, she said. We've reviewed all your documentation, conducted interviews with team members, and consulted with legal. Mr. Park's employment with NextCore Solutions has been terminated, effective immediately. He'll receive a severance package in accordance with his contract, but he will not be returning to the office. He's also been informed that any attempt to contact you will result in legal action. Thank you, I said quietly. There's more, Carla continued. During the investigation, we discovered that Mr. Park had been accessing confidential project files that he wasn't authorized for. He'd been using your login credentials, which he apparently had because of your relationship, to view information about upcoming projects and then positioning himself as knowledgeable about them in meetings. That's a serious security breach and a terminable offense on its own, even without the harassment and discrimination. My stomach dropped. He was using my credentials? Your password manager was saved on your home computer, which he had access to. We found evidence of multiple unauthorized access attempts from your home IP address during times when you were in the office. He was essentially stealing information and passing it off as his own expertise. I felt sick. Not just at the betrayal, I'd already processed that, but at my own security lapse. I'd been so careful at work, but I'd never imagined I needed to protect my credentials from my own boyfriend. We're implementing new security protocols as a result, Carla said. This was a valuable, if expensive, lesson for the company, and it makes the termination decision unambiguous. Mr. Park violated multiple policies, some of them terminable on first offense. I spent Thursday afternoon in a blur of transition meetings, getting briefed on my new responsibilities, meeting my new team members, setting up my new office. The space was twice the size of my old cubicle, with a window overlooking downtown Houston. My name was already on the door. Emma Chen, Senior Security Architect. Emma Chen. Not Emma Park, which Daniel had occasionally referred to me as already planning our future marriage without ever actually proposing. Just Emma Chen. My name. My identity. My career. On Friday, I had my first team meeting as a leader. 6 people looked to me for direction, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. But it felt right. I belonged here. I'd earned this. After the meeting, Jennifer pulled me aside. I heard you handled the security breach revelation well. Not everyone would have been so professional about discovering their partner had stolen their credentials. Ex-partner? I corrected. And honestly, after everything else, it was almost expected. He was using me in every other way. Why not that too? For what it's worth, I think you're going to thrive in this role. You've already shown better judgment and integrity than many senior leaders I've worked with. You documented a problem, brought it through proper channels, and never let it affect your work quality. That's leadership. That weekend, I met Rachel for lunch at our favorite Korean restaurant. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. So, Rachel said, pouring us both soju. How does it feel? Justice served? Promotion secured? Toxic ex removed from your life? Surreal, I admitted. Sometimes I still can't believe it worked, that I actually pulled it off. You didn't pull off anything, Rachel said firmly. You documented unacceptable behavior and reported it through proper channels. He's the one who pulled something, a manipulative scheme that blew up in his face. She was right, of course. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd simply refused to be a victim. My phone buzzed with an email. It was from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my blood run cold. We need to talk. I opened it, my heart pounding. It was from Daniel's mother. Ms. Chen. It read in stilted English. My son tells me there has been a misunderstanding at his work. He says you have made false accusations. I think you should know that Korean culture values forgiveness and harmony. My son is a good man from a good family. Perhaps you could speak to your HR department and clarify this misunderstanding? I'm sure we can resolve this peacefully. It would be a shame if this affected your reputation in the Korean community. I read it twice, then showed Rachel. Her expression darkened. Is she seriously trying to intimidate you? After everything her son did? She thinks I'm the naive American girl, I said slowly. She still doesn't know I understood everything she said about me, every insult, every dismissal, every strategic planning session about how Daniel should use me. Are you going to tell her? I thought about it for a long moment. Then I began typing a response in Korean. Mrs. Park, I want to be very clear about something. I speak Korean fluently. I studied at Yonsei University for 3 years. I understood every word you and Daniel said about me during our dinners together. Every insult, every plan to use me for his career advancement, every discussion about dumping me once I was no longer useful. The accusations I made are not false. They are documented with recordings, translations, and evidence. Your son violated multiple company policies, including confidential information breaches and creating a hostile work environment. His termination was based on his own actions and words. I value Korean culture deeply. That's why I'm disappointed that you used it to shield manipulative behavior, Respect and harmony are important, but they shouldn't come at the cost of justice or self-respect. Please do not contact me again. Sincerely, Emma Chen, Senior Security Architect, NextCore Solutions. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. Rachel read over my shoulder and burst out laughing. Oh my God, you're my hero. Do you think she'll respond? Probably not. But at least she'll know. My phone stayed silent for the rest of lunch. But later that evening, I got a single text from an unknown number. Just 2 words in Korean. I'm sorry. I didn't know if it was from Daniel or his mother. I didn't ask. I just blocked the number and deleted the message. 3 months later, I was sitting in my office reviewing the quarterly security audit when Jennifer knocked on my open door. Got a minute? I have someone I want you to meet. She stepped aside, and a young woman in her mid-20s entered hesitantly. Emma, this is Sarah Kim. She's joining us as a junior security analyst. Sarah, this is Emma Chen, your new supervisor. We shook hands, and I noticed Sarah's nervous energy immediately. Welcome to the team, I said warmly. Jennifer's told me great things about your work. Sarah smiled shyly. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And, she glanced at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. I wanted to thank you specifically. When I was interviewing, HR told me about NextCore's commitment to addressing workplace issues seriously. They mentioned, without names obviously, that a recent case had led to new policies and training. It made me feel like this would be a safe place to work. Something in my chest tightened. This was why I'd documented everything so carefully. Why I'd waited to do things the right way. Not just for myself, but for the next person and the person after that. That means a lot, I said. And I want you to know, if you ever experience anything that makes you uncomfortable, anything that seems unprofessional or inappropriate, you can come to me, or to HR. You'll be taken seriously. After Sarah left, Jennifer lingered in my doorway. You changed things here, she said quietly. The way you handled that situation, it raised the bar for everyone. We've implemented new training, new reporting structures, new accountability measures. All because you had the courage to document everything and come forward. I was just protecting myself, I said. No, you were protecting everyone who comes after you. That's leadership. That evening, I drove home to my apartment, my space, arranged exactly how I wanted it, filled with only my things. I'd redecorated in the months since Daniel left, painting the walls a soft gray, buying new furniture, hanging art I'd collected from Korean galleries during my college years. The space felt like mine in a way it never had before. I made myself dinner, kimchi jjigae from scratch, the recipe I'd learned from my Ajuma landlady in Seoul, and ate while watching the sunset over downtown Houston. My phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Dinner next week? Want to hear about the new job? Absolutely, I typed back. My treat. I'm still celebrating. There were things I still thought about sometimes. The early days with Daniel, when I'd believed he loved me. The moment I'd first understood what he was really saying in Korean. The careful, painful process of building a case against someone I'd once trusted. But mostly, I thought about how far I'd come. The promotion I'd earned. The justice I'd secured. The changes I'd helped implement. The young analysts like Sarah who would benefit from my refusal to accept unacceptable behavior. I thought about the woman who'd sat at that first dinner, listening to insults she wasn't supposed to understand, beginning to plan her response. I thought about how she'd waited, documented, and executed her plan with precision. I thought about how she'd won. And I realized something. I wasn't that woman anymore. She'd been operating in survival mode, gathering evidence, preparing for battle. That version of me had been necessary, but she was tired. She'd carried the weight of secret knowledge, playing a role, maintaining a facade. Now, I could just be Emma, senior security architect, leader, mentor, someone who'd stood up for herself and changed her workplace for the better. I raised my glass of soju to the empty apartment, to the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. Chalheso, I said quietly. Well done. And then I took a sip, set down the glass, and moved forward into my future, one where I'd never again stay silent while someone underestimated me in any language. The recording app on my phone, the one I'd used so carefully for months, was deleted now. I didn't need it anymore. The evidence had served its purpose. Justice had been done. And I was free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.